Hey everyone, and welcome to a uniquely focused explainer. Normally when we dive into source materials together, we're dealing with sprawling research papers or these massive, super complex data sets. But today, we're trying something completely different. We're going to deconstruct an extraordinarily brief piece of source material. It's a really fun, fascinating exercise in how we actually process information. Because think about it, when you strip away all the excess and the surrounding noise, what's actually left? How do we understand a document that gets straight to the point in the most literal way imaginable? Well, we're going to unpack this minimalist text together and examine every single nuance. So the crucial question we're tackling is, what can we learn from just 2 words? Now, I know that sounds like a bit of a trick question, but it's totally foundational to how we consume text. When you're presented with this kind of stark brevity, your brain immediately starts working overtime, looking for a micro-narrative. We're humans, we naturally seek out stories and connections. So how do we interpret hyper-concise information without any outside context whatsoever? When a document gives us nothing but the absolute bare minimum, the way we engage with it literally has to shift. We can't just skim it. We're forced to slow down, examine the absolute essence of the communication, and look at the words as deliberate, standalone choices. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is the literal central text of our source material. Take a second and just look at it as a standalone piece. Judge Judy. That's it. That's the whole thing. It's massive, right in front of us, so we can really examine it without a single visual distraction. There aren't any surrounding paragraphs to explain it to us, no footnotes to guide our interpretation, no introductory clauses. Nothing. And honestly, it commands your attention exactly because it refuses to give you anything else. It forces you to focus entirely on the core subject. It is the absolute ultimate distillation of a subject down to its most recognizable components. And this right here brilliantly illustrates the full picture of what we're actually dealing with. When we pull back just a fraction to reveal the exact, complete wording from our source document, we see the entire landscape of the text. Excerpts from Judge Judy. Judge Judy. This is incredible, right? Because it sets up an expectation and then immediately subverts it through this stark structural repetition. Just think about the word excerpt for a second. It inherently implies a piece of a larger whole, a snippet, a carefully selected quote from a wider body of work. But the excerpt provided here is completely identical to the title itself. It's a perfect closed loop. The promise of new, granular information is answered solely by echoing the exact premise we started with. Let's break down the literal anatomy of the source document, because honestly, every single character matters here. The document structure has 3 distinct parts. First up, the source title, which sets the stage and tells us the origin of the info. Second, the colon. Now, grammatically, a colon implies a gateway, right? It tells the reader that what comes next is going to explain or expand on or provide evidence for what came before. It builds a very specific type of anticipation. You see a colon and your brain gears up to receive new data. And third, the repeated text. The anticipation created by that colon is instantly met with a mere reflection of the title itself. It fulfills the grammatical contract of the colon in literally the most unexpected way possible. Now notice the visual symmetry of the core text itself, Judge versus Judy. Look at the absolute balance of juxtaposing these 2 specific words side by side without any surrounding data to dilute their impact. You've got that stark alliteration of the hard J sounds anchoring the front of both words, creating this really rhythmic reading experience. You also have the structural balance of a 5-letter word right next to a 4-letter word, making a tight, cohesive visual block. But let's look at the meaning here. The word judge represents a title, a system, this archetype of authority, while the word Judy represents a specific, familiar, individual name. Pushing these 2 concepts together, perfectly isolated like this, creates an intense equilibrium between institutional authority and personal identity. So how does this build our actual cognitive experience as readers? Because even reading a document this incredibly short is a chronological journey. Let's look at the reading process. Step 1, we observe the title and orient ourselves to the subject matter. Step 2, we expect an excerpt. Like we talked about, as focused learners, our brains are conditioned to know how formatting works. We're ready to read a quote, a summary, some new piece of evidence. And then step 3, we encounter the loop. The document doesn't give us a piece of dialogue, it just gives us the name, looped right back on itself. It creates this wild moment of cognitive dissonance, like a mental double-take, that forces us to stop, reread, and totally reevaluate what we just consumed. It literally turns passive reading into highly active engagement. Which brings us to our final takeaway. What meaning do we derive when the excerpt is merely the title itself? This entire explainer has been a journey through extreme textual minimalism. When the source material gives us exactly the same words as both the label and the content, it strips away everything unnecessary. It challenges our expectations of what a document actually owes us. It leaves us to ponder the sheer power of context and how much weight a single, repeated phrase carries when left entirely on its own to speak for itself. It's a lot to think about, right? Thank you so much for joining me on this analytical journey, and I absolutely can't wait to explore our next topic with you in the next explainer.